Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked B. Today is Tuesday, June 6th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your day every single day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we get into it, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on Twitter and Instagram at LockedNHLBruins. And you can find me, my dad jokes, hockey tweets at Ian C. McLaren. Although I'm taking a bit of a break from social media these days, partly to, just refresh mentally, because that is important. Now, last night I watched the series finale, allegedly, of Ted Lasso, where our American friend vacated his position, spoiler alert for those who haven't seen it yet, at AFC Richmond to return home and be with his family. It was 1 year ago today that the Boston Bruins experienced a coaching change, as Don Sweeney announced that Bruce Cassidy had been fired after 6 seasons behind the bench, and after leading the team to a Stanley Cup final appearance in 2019, but also a first-round loss to the Carolina Hurricanes in 7 games last year. Don Sweeney called it a very, very difficult decision. He met with Bruce and his family, and he said he felt it was a decision that was in the best interest of where the team is now and moving forward. Don Sweeney said, quote, "I just felt that the messaging and the voice that was going to be required, I felt that we needed a new direction. And also that with players young and old, there's a message delivery that a new voice will resonate more." He added, quote, "I think the players think, like I do, that Bruce is a terrific coach, and I think you'll have a terrific amount of success as he did here in his next opportunity. And I think every player would agree with that. He's a terrific coach." Now, end quote. Bruce Cassidy, of course, was quickly scooped up by the Vegas Golden Knights, and they are 2 wins away from winning a Stanley Cup after beating the Florida Panthers last night in Game 2 of the final. I didn't watch it. I haven't been able to watch much hockey since the Bruins lost. And I did see some highlights. I saw Matthew Tkachuk level Jack Eichel. I saw Eichel come back and set up a goal. And I saw our friends from Locked On Golden Knights commenting this morning about how important Bruce Cassidy has been for the Vegas Golden Knights. Tony Cordasco of Locked On VGK saying if Vegas wins the cup, it's primarily because of Cassidy. He turned a soft finesse team into a gritty defensive team. Really solid coach. I've been impressed with him all season. And of course, looking at the tweet the Bruins put out last year announcing the move, you can see so many people replying, "Terrible decision. Should have been Don Sweeney. Why are you letting him go? This doesn't make any sense." And of course, he had a winning record with the Bruins, 245, 108, 46, but a losing record in the playoffs, 36 and 37. Game 7 of the 2019 final being a pivotal loss that will haunt us for quite some time. And of course, losing in Game 7 to Carolina in the playoffs last year. Of course, we'll talk about in a moment how the Bruins had a similar result this season, but was this the wrong decision? Well, not necessarily because of how the Bruins played, at least in the regular season. Now, Bruce Cassidy was fired on June 6th. On July 3rd, it was announced that Jim Montgomery had been hired to replace him. Jim has a winning history, Don Sweeney said at the time, and throughout the interview process, he conveyed his ability to connect with all types of players while also demanding that his team play with structure. He had spent the past couple of seasons with the St. Louis Blues as an assistant coach. He had been let go from Dallas, his first NHL head coach position, because of unprofessional conduct. Montgomery later said he was receiving counseling for alcohol abuse and had checked himself into an inpatient residential program. He said sometimes it takes an unbearable consequence in your life to happen to have an unbelievable breakthrough. Didn't realize he was headed down the wrong path, but after 9 months of treatment, he declared himself sober and thankful that he's now a better husband, father, son, and coach. And of course, he had a very successful first season with the Boston Bruins. And we're going to talk about that here in a moment. But first, a quick word about today's sponsor, our friends over at eBay Motors. Now, eBay Motors has all the right parts for your vehicle to get back on the road. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit, and it's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Next time you need parts or accessories, head to ebaymotors.com. With their eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit or your money back. They have over 122 million parts to choose from, so you'll be back on the road in no time. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. The guaranteed fit is available only to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. But get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride today. Thank you so much once again for making Locked On Boston Bruins part of your day every single day. Free and available wherever you get podcasts. And everydayers can expect a review of the front office this past season on tomorrow's episode. Today, however, we're talking about the coaching. And after reviewing the decision to fire Bruce Cassidy and hire Jim Montgomery, let's talk about how Jim Montgomery fared in his first season as coach of the Boston Bruins. One of the big reasons why Cassidy was let go and Montgomery was brought in, we saw it in the comments from Don Sweeney, was that Cassidy's messaging wasn't resonating with players young and old. Sweeney said Montgomery has an ability to connect with all types of players while also demanding that his teams play with structure. Jim Montgomery is now a finalist, also probably the favorite to win the Jack Adams Award as the NHL's top coach this past season. He's up for the award along with, who else is in there? Lindy Ruff, I believe, as well as Dave Haxtell of the Seattle Kraken. And why is that? Well, Jim Montgomery just coached his team to the best season in regular season history in the NHL. Most wins, 65. Most points, 135 in a single season in NHL history. The Bruins won the President's Trophy for the best record in the regular season, an astonishing .823 point percentage, a plus 128 goal differential. The Bruins ranked first in goals against per game, and on the penalty kill, they ranked second in goals per game and 12th on the power play. 11 players scored at least 10 goals for the Bruins during the regular season, led by David Pastrnak, of course, who had a career-high 61. He is a first-time finalist, and he'd be the fifth Bruins coach to win the award, and the first since Bruce Cassidy won it back in 2019-20. The Bruins, of course, followed up that Game 7 loss to the Blues with a President's Trophy winning season in the COVID-shortened regular season. And then they went on to lose in the bubble. We all know that whole story, of course. Now, the Bruins followed up this historic regular season by achieving the same result that they had last year under Bruce Cassidy. Perhaps even a worse result in context, because the Bruins, of course, I keep saying of course, but the Bruins were by far the top seed coming into the playoffs. Best regular season in NHL history, going up against a wildcard team that finished 43 points behind them in the standings. And yet they lost to the Florida Panthers in the opening round. What went wrong? Well, yeah, there were some questionable decisions made by Montgomery in the postseason. The regular season went so well. He pushed the right buttons. He got the most out of his players, developed strong relationships with them. The roster was pretty fine-tuned and motivated. But things went off the rails in the playoffs. There's really no denying it. Stuck with Linus Ullmark too long. Probably should have gone to him or gone to Jeremy Swayman after Game 5, after that gaffe in overtime by Ullmark to give away the puck, leading directly to the game-winning goal. He chose to go back to Ullmark. The Bruins should have won Game 6. I saw a lot of people talking about last night how the Florida Panthers looked very shaky defensively. Sergei Bobrovsky was pulled. Why couldn't they have played like that against the Bruins? Well, they kind of did in Game 6. The Bruins should have won that game. They were up in that game. They eventually lost 7-5, and perhaps if Swayman had been in there, could have been a bit tighter defensively. The Bruins maybe were lacking a bit of confidence in Ullmark, subconsciously, even after the Game 5 error. So that was a mistake. Sticking with Derek Forbort for all 7 games while benching Matt Grzelcyk, that was a mistake as well. Mixing up the lines, not going back to Brad Marchand and Patrice Bergeron when the captain was ready to return from injury, that was a mistake. Not resting some guys down the stretch, in hindsight, not wise. I know they wanted to go into the playoffs fresh and ready to go, but probably should have done a bit more in terms of load management down the stretch. Overall, though, you have to consider Jim Montgomery's first season behind the bench as a success, his first regular season at least. The playoffs, they probably could have used a more veteran coach pulling the strings, making the decisions there. And it's a learning opportunity for Jim Montgomery. Unfortunately, likely won't get the same opportunity for success moving forward, because we know there's going to be a lot of roster turnover. There's going to be possibly a lack of Bergeron and David Krejci if they choose to retire. It's been over a month now. We haven't heard anything, and less than a month until free agency, and we were promised a decision before then. So that could happen any day now. We could hear from either of those two players about their futures. Yeah, Montgomery was the right man for the job, as we saw during the regular season. but his lack of playoff experience and in these big moments certainly came back to bite the Bruins, and they could have really used. I don't want to say they would have done better under Bruce Cassidy because, as we'll talk about here in a moment, probably not even the same situation that they are facing once you get down to it. But at the same time, would have been nice to have a bit more experience in the playoffs for the Bruins losing to the Florida Panthers. Again, I can't even stomach yet looking at the Stanley Cup final because just still really wish the Bruins had made it, and they should have beaten the Florida Panthers in that first round series. We're going to talk about next if the Bruins made a mistake firing Bruce Cassidy and bringing in Jim Montgomery after the break. So overall, did the Bruins err in replacing Bruce Cassidy with Jim Montgomery? It's easy to make that argument here this morning on the 1-year anniversary of Cassidy's firing and with Cassidy 2 wins away from winning the Stanley Cup. The reality is sometimes messaging just gets a bit stale from the head coach. Sometimes you do indeed need a new voice. And if Cassidy had remained behind the bench, so much could have been different for the Boston Bruins this season. Maybe Bergeron and Krejci don't come back. Maybe DeBrusk doesn't rescind his trade request. Maybe Trent Frederick doesn't thrive and become a 17-goal scorer. Maybe a whole bunch of things don't fall into place the right way for the Bruins to go all in and set this history by having the best regular season. You can't just say the Bruins would have been in the same position heading into the playoffs with Bruce Cassidy and not Jim Montgomery. Chances are they don't finish first place overall. They don't have the same roster. They don't have these trade deadline acquisitions, etc., etc. It's not a linear thing. However, with Bruce Cassidy's track record in the playoffs, with the mistakes or with the lessons that he had picked up over the past 6 seasons, would he have been able to coach the Bruins past the Florida Panthers in the first round? I mean, possibly. We all know he was reluctant to switch up his line combinations, even if things weren't going right. So we wouldn't have got that excessive line juggling that hurt them in Game 5. Maybe he would have had more trust in Jeremy Swayman after having gone to him earlier in the series last year against the Hurricanes. I mean, who knows? It's a moot point at this juncture because we know how things happened is what was meant to be. And Bruce Cassidy, I don't want to say he lost the room, but certainly some players, young and old, had kind of grown tired of how he was presenting as head coach. And that happens, you know. Sometimes you need a fresh voice, and then over time that diminishes, and then it happens again. There's a reason why coaches around the NHL don't have lifetime tenure. They wear out their welcome. The messaging is lost. You just need something to shake things up. And general managers have that play to make 2-3 times before they are replaced and the cycle continues. Front office has a longer shelf life than coaches in the NHL. There was a lot of pressure on Don Sweeney after last season. he made that decision, and for 6-7 months in the regular season, it looked like a genius move. And there's a reason why he's a finalist for GM of the year, partly because of that decision. And is a learning lesson for Jim Montgomery. We'll see. The real test for Montgomery is probably going to come next season when you don't have this loaded roster. You perhaps only have one of the 2-star goalies that won the Jennings Trophy this season. Maybe you're dealing with a new captain without your top 2 centers. A lot of players coming up from AHL, some new faces. That's going to be a real test for Montgomery, and we'll see what he has in him as head coach under those circumstances. You can easily make the argument that he didn't really have to do much as head coach this season. And when the pressure was on, that's when he faltered. But I'm still a big fan of Jim Montgomery. I think the players respect him. They like him. He's bringing in this peer mentoring program next season, which I think will be helpful. And I'm excited to see what he can bring, and also pretty happy for Bruce Cassidy. You can still argue that he got a raw deal in Boston, that he should have been brought back for at least one more season and given a chance to finish some business with this group. I think you can both say that it was a mistake to let Cassidy go, but also the right decision. And also be happy for him for jumping into a new opportunity, taking Vegas all the way. Yes, it would have been nice to see the Bruins and Golden Knights. What a story that would have been. But alas, it's the Panthers, and they're down 2-0. Cassidy's up, likely going to win the Stanley Cup. It's going to be hard to watch, but we can still be happy for him and say the Bruins needed a new voice. Good for him for succeeding in his new opportunity. I don't think the Bruins made a mistake at the end of the day. They could have used some more experience in the playoffs, but Jim Montgomery is going to win the Jack Adams Trophy. So that's hard to argue against as well. Cassidy's going to win the Stanley Cup. But it's not as simple as saying if Cassidy was still in Boston that it would have been the Bruins winning the Cup instead of Vegas, because so much could have gone different over the course of last summer and this past regular season. All right, that's it for today's episode, my friends. On tomorrow's podcast, we're going to look at Don Sweeney, Cam Neely, front office season in review. Look at the good, the bad, and assess what they might do over the offseason. I hope you're all doing well, taking care of yourselves, taking care of each other. And we'll talk to you again tomorrow here on Locked On Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day.